Okay. One more second, and I'll have all control panels here ready. So we will be good to go. Very good. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me this evening. I always have to remind myself when I do those live events, on online live events, that a lot of people are telling me they are watching the recording after the fact. So that's always a good reminder. So I have to keep in mind to talk to the people that will be watching it as the recording. I'll introduce myself before in a moment, fully introduce myself. Before I do that, just wanted to mention that while I'm speaking, you're most welcome to throw in your questions by raising your hand on, via Zoom, or putting it in the chat. I will try to pick on the questions because I really like conversations much more than just having one-way communication from my end. So you're most welcome to ask questions while I speak. Also, what I started doing in recent webinars, at the end, I'm trying to make it more of a conversation. So I call it not a Q&A, but a Q&C, questions and conversation. And I would love for you to stick after the content and, share, ask, tell me what you're working on. So it will be a little bit more like a networking, and not just something that I'm presenting and that's it. And you're most welcome. So I really encourage that open conversation that seems to be interesting to have beyond the scope of this presentation today. So you are most welcome. We'll do that. Also, I'm going to be providing or giving you a gift. So first of all, let me say, no sales pitch, no sign up to my bootcamp, no buy my product, no product to sell, just information, knowledge, sharing. And at the end, I'll give you, actually, it's a combo of 3 gifts. I'll give you the how to access it. So there is a gift at the end. You're most welcome to benefit from it. Obviously, it's a free gift, and you're not obligated to do anything besides actually leveraging or using it. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Dani Beit-Or. I live in Southern California. I live in California for the past 20 years, Southern California for the past 10, Northern California for the previous 10. And I've been a real estate investor since the year 2002, when I started while living in Europe, buying US real estate completely remotely. The whole concept was new at the time, or was very undeveloped at the time, buying, remotely, thousands of miles away, in a different country, in a different language, in the different culture, different laws, regulation. So the gaps were tremendous, right? Also, in 2002, a lot of the technology, websites, and application we have today did not exist. Zillow was not even an idea. Public records were, what public records? So there was very challenging. I feel ancient now. But I still decided that this is what I want to pursue, and I bought my first rental property in 2002 outside of Phoenix, Arizona. After purchasing that property and then doing 2 other small investments, in 2004, I moved to the US with my wife, and I decided already by that time, I kind of fell in love with the idea of real estate, with the whole concept of investing in real estate. And I wanted to immerse myself in this. I also wanted to be knowledgeable, develop skill, expertise, and was hoping that I could also help others do the same, because I saw that I'm really enjoying the investing side, but also the teaching side and the sharing and coaching and guiding, etc. So for me, having an event like this one, it's really like uplifting my spirit, because I like those kind of opportunities to interact, to share, to talk real estate, talk shop. So that's actually fun for me to do. You just find me anywhere and start talking real estate, I'm probably not going to shut up much about it. Since then, since 2004, and still doing it, I've been investing myself and helping others invest in primarily long-term rental properties, what I like to call boring real estate, buying single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. 100% of the activity is out of state, so all our clients live in one area, um, mostly in the different parts of the US and Europe, and are buying completely in other parts of the country. So we're 100% out of state in multiple US metros, in multiple states. It's kind of something that's changing every once in a while as the local economies, change over time. To date, I've probably helped somewhere in the ballpark of 5,000 properties to be purchased by our clients in different parts of the country. So I've been doing this for quite some time, been through before the crash of 2008, during the crash of 2008, after, before COVID, during COVID, all of those things, all of those ups and downs in the economy, big ones and small ones, being kind of working through the challenges each one is presenting, always trying to take what I'm learning and what I'm going through myself, personally going myself through my clients and seeing what they're struggling with and bringing it back to the community so you can benefit and learn from that as well. I wanted kind of to give you a gist of maybe about 10 years ago, we kind of started properly tracking where people are buying and where people are coming from. Before, we were not tracking it very clearly. So that's just to show you every red dot on the map is a property that's owned by one of our investors, clients. Every blue dot is actually a property that we flipped. So we have done some flips over the years, just decided to discontinue that flipping program around 2018. And as you can see, a lot of our clients are coming from the West Coast, different parts of the West Coast. Quite a few are coming from the Northeast, and quite a few are coming from different parts of Europe. I want to give you a little warning here. I think there's one image that I actually used to generate for an AI kind of thing. So there is no AI being utilized in this presentation. Everything is based on actual experience, actual doing, actually in the trenches, visiting, investing, failing, succeeding. So there's no AI integrated except one image. So if you're expecting some sort of I don't know, AI to be involved, it's not going to happen. And hang on a second. Okay, so what I've decided to do for tonight is to take the questions, the top questions, the top concerns, the top challenges that we know about from investors, from our clients, and kind of provide answers for them, really the top ones, because those are the things that I see that are coming again and again and again, and I wanted to address them. How do I know what are those things? Well, what you're seeing in front of you is what we call our intake form. Every time we meet with a potential new clients, then that client, it starts with completing our intake form, that it's not too long, it's nothing too personal, no credit card, no social security, it's not a mortgage application. It's just going through some questions in order to get a little bit better understanding who you are, what your background, your experience, so we can actually drive the conversation between us a little bit better. So it helps both the person who's coming to the meeting and myself be more prepared and ready for the meeting, and then we can jump on the call. Part of that intake form is people do share what their concerns and challenges, etc. So we can go back, and we have thousands of those lines completed, and we can go back and check and learn and kind of bring out those items. So definitely something that we've been working on, of collecting for many years. And you know what? It's just a great source of data. And that's how I decided to kind of bring this information to you guys, by using all the information that was generated in this form. So let's start with the top kind of question that comes up many times, when we are speaking to clients, speaking to investors, and it all comes down to the how do I, as an investor, beginner or experienced, can reduce the risk of financial loss? So financial loss is a term that we see a lot. So how can I reduce the risk? And I want to kind of address that because I think it's something that bugging a lot of people, especially beginners that are not sure how to address that question. So I want to start, before I break it down into some components, and maybe suggest a little way of tackling this point. I found over my career that when I face the word risk or fear, it's really an abstract notion that it's hard to tackle and provide a clear answer. So how do you mitigate a risk? Well, I don't know that. What is a risk? Oh, what is a risk? Let's break down the risk into components, divide and conquer, break it down and tackle them one at a time. All of a sudden, just by doing this splitting exercise, breaking it down into components, helps me as a person to divide and conquer, say, okay, I know how to tackle this. I know how to mitigate this. I may not know how to mitigate another one, but at least from a cloud of concept of abstract idea, I'm breaking it down into components that I can tackle and then address one by one. The way I perceive every investment decision that we are making about an investment property is the following. Every investment, not every house, every investment actually sits on multiple pillars of decision making, right? Each one of those pillars, it can be 20 of them, 25, 15, maybe 100, but let's just use 20 as a round number. I look at those 20 pillars as each one of them is important, but not critical. It's not insignificant, but at the same time is also not critical. And while all those important pillars are part of the process or making a decision, I do know, or the way I perceived it, that if my decision, my investment decision, sits on those pillars, if one of those pillars break or fail, I still, in this example, let's say I have 20 of those, 20 important decisions. Out of the 20 decisions, if one fail, I still have 19 holding my investment decision, right? Very similar to how we are building houses. So in a way, just by understanding that every decision that we're making is every important decision, and I'm emphasizing not critical decision, important decision. We have many of them. And for example, let's just explore one of those decisions. So one example is, which metro are we investing in, right? Or which segment of the market? Who's going to manage the property, right? Or how do we vet the property manager? Who's the realtor? Or how do we vet the realtor? What's the cash flow? All of those things and more, I'm just using the main ones, are part of our decision-making process. And as an example, let's just say I made a decision, and out of my decision, it turned out that the property manager that I selected to work with is not performing well. I'm not saying he's a crook. I'm not saying, he's complete jerk. I'm just saying, let's just say they're not responsive. They're not performing well. You know what? That doesn't crumble all my decision or all my investment, because many other decisions along the line were done as part of that process. So the way I tackle it, I look at all those pillars, and in my mind, I know that there's very likely that out of the 20 pillars, call it 25, call it 30, maybe 3 or 4 of them will not pan out as planned. When I say do not pan out, doesn't mean they're completely crash. Just mean, let's just say I was expecting a cash flow of $1,000, $2,000 a year, and it turned out to be only $1,000 a year, right? That does not, kill my deal. It's just not performing as expected. So that's an example of, here's one of those pillars not performing, but still not completely crashing my deal. Because what I found is, if I made all those important decisions properly, I definitely get to the point that um, um, that there are other strong pillars or factors that are supporting my decision, and for that reason, my decision is stable, right? Even if not all of them, pan out properly. So breaking it down into components, pillars, understanding which ones are the important ones, but not necessarily the critical ones, and then realizing, yes, some of them will not turn out as expected, but we made multiple important decisions, good important decisions along the way, realizing that not all of them will pan out perfectly, still supports my decision process of that property. And for those of you, I'm just going to take a quick break, like to make sure those of you who joined a little bit late when I was already speaking, you're most welcome to plug in your questions in the chat. I'll try to pick on those questions as we speak. So feel free to do that. And we will definitely have time, not just for a Q&A, but Q&C, questions and conversations at the end. So I am not looking to rush through this and get to the Q&A and move on with the evening. Although I do have plans tonight, I'm definitely looking for the engaging and having conversation with you. So keep that in mind. And I'm also going to give a gift and show you how you can benefit from a gift towards the end. So just a little announcement, because I see people are joining in as we are as I'm speaking here. Let's talk about one thing that it's been bugging me, I'll admit, for many, many years, is that I think most people, or at least most property managers, are not handling correctly. And that's, how do I, as an investor, how do I, as Dani, who leads a group of investors, how do I tell property managers, other people, ways to reduce the vacancy between tenants, right? So we all know that, or maybe I should say we don't all know, but many of us probably understand that when we own properties throughout the country, in most parts of the country, once a tenant moves out, it takes a few days to freshen up the house, maybe needs a little bit work, maybe more work, and then we can list it back and find another tenant. That turn period can be as short as a week, and it can be as long as maybe more than a month. Really, it depends on the efficiency of the team that are doing it, right? Most property managers, when we are working with property managers, we may do things differently if we do it by ourselves, but if we work with property managers, most property managers work in a series. A series means one step after another, after another, after another. So it's hard to do the third step in the process before we completed 1 and 2, in most cases. What happens, why is that a problem? Because most property managers will only do the walkthrough of the property after the current tenant moves out, then do an estimate what needs to be done, maybe then call a professional like a contractor or a handyman to come in and do an additional walkthrough and estimate, then send the information to you, the owner, the remote owner, wait for you to approve or not approve or negotiate or ask for another bid. So we waste some time here, and only then we can have the work start. Now, if it takes 5 days, if it takes 10 days, depend how much work we have, and only then the house is finally ready. When the house is finally ready, we can list it for leasing, in Zillow or whatever we're going to use, and then start showing it and processing application and all of those great stuff. This is how a lot of people work this way, and a lot of property management companies work this way. And for many years, I had this philosophical argument, or I would say back and forth argument with all the property managers that I work, that I just don't approve or don't think this is an efficient way to go about it, and it's not servicing us owners properly. And I decided that I need to change that. So several months ago, I just sat down with myself. I broke down all the steps into single, main task: walkthrough, budget, work, pictures, cleaning, whatever needs to be done from, in the process of switching from tenant A to tenant B. And I decided that we are no longer going to do it in a series, but we're going to do it in parallel as much as possible, meaning some tasks could happen and could work at the same time. For example, we are starting to review the property and do walkthrough, at least initial walkthrough, and having the contractor come in and do the initial walkthrough before the current tenant even moves out. If we do it before they move out, then we get ahead of the game, and we save on days on vacancy, right? So we don't have to waste valuable time when the house is vacant, when some of those tasks we can do while it's still occupied with the current tenant. Then we try to make sure we have quality photos of the property before even, from when we buy it. So instead of waiting for all the work to be done, I'm actually using the photos that I have from the past, because assuming at some point of time I took quality photos, and we do take earlier in the process quality photos at least once, so we can reuse them and reuse them again and again and again. And then we make sure that if the work needs to be done, go ahead and do that. But maybe the work that needs to be done to the house is not interfering with me listing the house and putting it on the market and start looking for tenants. Actually, we are even trying to push it to the point that if we can, let's list the house and start looking for tenants, and possibly even showing it while the current tenant is already there. So that means I'm breaking those tasks into different tasks, and I'm definitely trying to tackle them earlier on in the process, and in eliminating or reducing the days of vacancy, to the minimum, right? In my ideal scenario, and this is where we aspire, and I have to make a note here, some of you may live in parts of the country where vacancy is like nothing, right? People rent just, like people in Silicon Valley, some parts of Seattle, some parts of Washington, D.C., and I'm sure there's a few other pockets around the country. There's so much demand for housing. The new tenant and his moving truck are waiting outside for the current tenant to finish loading their truck, and there's literally zero vacancy, right? It does happen on rare occasion. There are different pockets to do that. In most parts of the country, that's not how it operates. So if I am not in an area that operates with such a high demand for housing, for rentals, New York as well, I might as well want to minimize the vacancy, which is eating a lot of dollars every day that it's not generating, right? So how do we do that? We start the process before a tenant moves out. We try to do as much as possible before the tenant moves out. Yes, I cannot clean the house for the next tenant until they move out. I'll have to wait with that. I cannot clean the house until the handyman has not go through the house and did everything they need to do for a few days. Absolutely. So there's maybe going to be some downtime, but who says I cannot list the house at the same time? So let me give you a few examples why property managers are always resisting it, right? When I tell them, and I have this argument with them, they tell me, listen, Danny, when we go to the house, if we go, well, the current tenant is still there, many times they're very messy and they're not clean, and there's a lot of furniture, and you can't really tell what's going on. And then when they move out, there's a lot of surprises, and they're all over the work again. And okay, you know what? They're right. I don't argue that they're not incorrect. But what I've learned over the years is that what they just described definitely happens 20 to 30% of the times. So the entire process is set up based on what happens 20 to 30% of the times, and not what happens 70 or 60%, even 50% of the times, right? Why don't you accommodate or create two processes when my idea works and when my idea of how to tackle this doesn't work, right? I definitely know that even with this ideal situation where how I tackle, changing tenants, I know very well that it's not going to work in all situations. I know there are messy tenants. I know there are kind of, I don't want to say hoarders, but there are, tons of maybe furnitures, and maybe 4 kids, and maybe the tenants even if they're not, maybe they're really not cooperating with me. Absolutely, I understand. When those things happen, let's fall back to the basic plan, working in a series, because we don't have a option. But how about 50%, 60% of the time, we work in a more efficient way. They don't even want to start tackling this the way I'm presenting because they're just accustomed, right? Old dogs, new tricks. So what we are doing right now, we are completely changing the way we address and approach leasing in order to reduce the downtime, reduce the vacancy. Those are actually money generating days, plus a lot of stress and unknown, and people get upset. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? That's a common question that we get, and we're trying to completely change that. So I don't know how you are using and what you are doing, property manager or by yourself, and what process. But you know what? I want to throw a question here. We can tackle now or later. Tell me, how do you go about it? How do you get involved? How do you normally tackle the leasing process? Maybe there's something I'm missing that I can pick up from you, or maybe there's something you're doing and you're not sure if it's working or not, and we can maybe share that information with you. So I would love to learn more about it. And it all took some rethinking, some, questioning or challenging the status quo in order to understand we not only that we can do things differently, we should do differently, right? And I'm still struggling with property manager on that aspect. So it's maybe theoretically nice to say how we go about it, while as long as we're working with property managers, and we do a lot, that's always been a challenge. All right, the next thing that comes up is many times, how do we prevent the chances of problematic tenants? What is problematic tenants? They don't pay, squatters, evictions, all of those things, right? All of that good stuff, it's definitely out there. So let me tell you how I found that works very well for us to tackle this challenge. First of all, I call it just let's go and find places that inherently, very likely, are filtering people naturally. They are bringing in certain type of renters that are typically not positioned to have problems. So when we are charging $1,850 for a monthly rent, we want the family or the tenant that can actually pay that, and they're not struggling to pay that, right? So right, just by going to different parts of the segments of the market, right, we may be eliminating some problematic tenants just to begin with. So that's one way, or one way to go about it. Another way, or second way to tackle is to do proper screening. And that may be obvious, but I've seen so many people not doing it properly. So, for example, about maybe 2 years ago, or a year and a half, 2 years ago, one of the property managers we work with in Tennessee, I invited him to do a podcast with us. We have a podcast. I invited him to be a guest to talk about. I told him, I don't want you to talk about the typical conversations property managers have when, on podcasts with tenants and the issues. I want you to talk about this problem. I want you to talk about what happens before and what happens after or at the end, right? And we were having a very lengthy conversation detailing what he is doing on the front side of the lease, on the processing and screening and vetting to make sure we get the right person in. And when we jumped over to this other side of the lease, right, when maybe there's problems still or not problems, we were kind of diving into that, when lease ends or if there is issue, and he kept referencing back to the beginning. You see, he kept saying, when we do, as property manager, proper screening, we are avoiding or reducing, not avoiding, reducing the chances that we're going to have those issues, right? So if you don't have a proper protocol, tap into someone, a resource, a leasing agent. They will help you navigate this. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. There are tools, it's not expensive. Doing that properly will, screening, background check, whatever, the law allows or enables, will tremendously help you with reducing the chance of having problematic tenants, right? It's a process. You're vetting the tenant. It's a process. You're calling previous owners, that helps with that, right? Again, I heard someone say that they never call the last owner. If they call the last owner and this is a bad tenant, that owner would want to get rid of them, and they will tell you how great that person is, and now you just inherited the problem. So that are one of those people that we were working on the process of the leasing that I just showed you, said, you know what, I never called the last owner. That is not a good way to go about it. And calling the previous owner or owners is part of a process of vetting. It's not the only thing, it's a part of it. So in summary for this one, going to certain parts, segments of the market and doing proper vetting will tremendously or very likely reduce the challenges of having problematic tenants. So that can be, work in your favor. One of the other items that came through the list of challenges and obstacles and concerns that we have is, how do I know what to buy, right? Where to buy and what to buy. So there's a big dilemma, a big question mark from people like yourself, maybe. What should I be buying, or what property or where? And in the professional term, many times it's called, what's your buy box, right? I don't know if you heard that term, buy box, right? Maybe you have, but I think it sounds pretty explanatory. What I found over the years of working with many investors and seeing how things start, continue, evolve, selling, doing 1031 exchange, buying another one, buying another two, progressing, I want to tell you that one of the things that was clear for me that people do not do and should be doing is not where you should buy or what you should buy, is more who you are. Who you are, I'll even make it right now. And what do I mean by that? I call it, instead of the buy box, I call it the personality box, because you may be here and you're hearing about, not here because this is more of a general session, but maybe you're attending a seminar or a webinar or whatever, and someone talks about, I don't know, buying self-storage, right? Nothing wrong with self-storage, right? That's fine. But is it the good fit for you as an investor? Meaning, what's your experience? What's your comfort level? How available are you? For example, if you are a beginner and you're jumping in and start flipping properties remotely, which I see those people and they're actually talking to me. I had a conversation with a young guy, want to flip remotely earlier today. And I'm like, is it up your alley? Are you detailed enough to manage a flip? Are you good with communicating with people in order to oversee the project management aspect, which is a really significant aspect of the flip, or not? Now, if you are, great, it's a good fit. But many times I see the person who doesn't want to live, pick up the phone or talk to anybody, or not good with communication for one reason or another, and they want to flip a house, which flipping will just involve a lot of communication with the different parties. And guess what? It's a recipe for, let's just say, not failure, but not being successful, because it's not a good fit between the person who's doing the investment and the type of the investment. So ask yourself, where am I right now in my life as an investor? How busy, available am I or not? Am I comfortable really making such an investment? Am I buying cash, or am I getting a mortgage? Can I get a mortgage? All of those things are not, you see, I haven't even said anything about a property. It's all about the profile, my profile as an investor, how to navigate, how to select the most suitable investment avenue or direction for me right now. And when I say right now, for example, I have a lot of investors that when they start out, they want to keep it simple. They say, you know what, I want the single family house that is almost rent ready, so I could put it back on the market as quickly as possible. Meaning after buying as a rental, so I don't have to spend a lot of time and money on renovating it. I understand I need to spend a little bit maybe, and I want to be, and I'm very busy and I don't have time for it. I want it to be as less involved as possible. All right, let's find you that kind of a property. That investor, which we had that conversation today, 5 years later, say, you know what, Danny, I've done 3 of such houses. How about we do something that requires a little bit more work? How about we do something that is a little bit more added value by finishing the basement or something, or whatever. Or I want to do, maybe consider doing a fourplex because I think fourplex, whatever. See, so that person now, as maybe a beginner or around the beginning, or maybe more suitable to buy something more, let's just say, more passive, not necessarily fully passive, but more passive. And a few years later, when he or she built their confidence, their comfort, their trust that the system works, the trust that those properties do generate rents and income, etc., that person comes back by themselves and tells us, I'm ready for something else, or I have an appetite, strategic financial appetite, to do something different. What can we do? I definitely feel comfortable taking on something that let's say require more work, right? As an example. So I want you to think about not the buy box, because that's like an obvious way where people go and start looking and maybe putting it together or not. But the buy box should more be based on the personality box, your availability, comfort level, confidence, cash available, mortgage available, etc. Really important. And I think most people are just skipping that and following the herd, which is okay, but it's not always gonna yield the results you're looking for naturally. Okay. Okay, very, very important topic that comes up a lot. And this is what I call the cash flow intimidation, or the lack of good cash flow. We are intimidating to make a deal. Let's tackle this one from several perspectives, because this is a big one, in my opinion, an important one. But once we are able to make some order in the chaos and maybe create some rationale, maybe that will open up some ideas to you how to tackle this. So first of all, I want to talk about cash flow in the sense of, where are you on the scale of investing, right? A lot of people want to really focus only on cash flow. And that usually means they'll buy properties that are very cash flow, cash cow, cash flow driven. And there's nothing wrong with it. And you just need to understand where you are on that scale. Some people that I talk to say, you know what, I couldn't care about the cash flow. I'd rather it would be at least breaking even. Even if it's a little bit negative, I'm okay with it. But I want to base on appreciation, right? My goal or my focus is appreciation. And yet again, there's nothing wrong with that. I have been doing investment over my years on both sides of the scale. My personal comfort zone is actually somewhere in the middle. I do want at least a small cash flow, which I call a buffer or a cushion or some margin of error. So I really want to have a little bit of a cash flow on one hand, but I also want to, or I also assume or knowing the appreciation is there, but I don't want to bet on appreciation. I don't want to think that because last year we did 8.5%, that means that this year is going to be at least 8.5% or 8 or something like that. I don't. Past appreciation is not an indication to future appreciation. So I can't really bet on one or the other completely. I want to mesh, and I'll show you how I mesh it together. So personally, I really love the middle ground of those two, and maybe around the middle ground. And I want to have a combination of the two, in a conservative way, in a very realistic way, in a very not speculative way, or minimal speculation. So where you are on that scale is really important to understand, and maybe understanding also it doesn't have to be black or white. There is a lot of gray in the middle, which people tend to forget. Next thing I want to talk, which is obviously impacting the cash flow quite a bit is the interest rate. Let's just put some rationale here, okay? Everybody that I'm talking to is very concerned about the high interest rate. And I ask those who have the patience to speak with and to stick with my conversation, high is relatively to what? Is it relatively to zero? Well, you know what? We all know zero is not an option, right? There's no such thing as zero. Well, let's just say realistically, there's no such thing as zero. So relatively to zero, of course we are, but zero is not our baseline. So what is our baseline? Oh, COVID rate, 3.5%. Oh, so now we're very high, double, right? Double what we had in COVID. So relatively to COVID, we're very high. I agree, but you know what? COVID rate is like one in a lifetime kind of a thing, or almost once in a lifetime kind of thing. It's also a fluke, right? This is not something we could assume. So we are using that as a baseline, but it was just something happened in the world and we were lucky to get those rates. And this is lucky, right? We were lucky. That's not also the baseline. So what is the baseline? Well, throughout my career, I've been higher than today. I've been lower than today. I think in my mind, around 5.5%, 6%, 5% for investment properties is a good baseline, right? I've seen it many, many years sticking around that numbers when we're not kind of, hyperinflation or, or post hyperinflation situation. So I don't know exactly what you want to call it, but let's just call it 5.5, right? I hope you're okay with that. So let's use 5.5. So 7% compared to 5.5 no longer sounds super high. It just sounds higher for sure. But all of a sudden, if the baseline is 5.5, sometimes it's all about explaining to ourselves how to look at things in order to simplify them, in order to be able to make decisions, right? So when I'm telling you, if you agree with that and if you're okay, that 5.5 is a baseline, maybe even 6, and you're like, you know what? Now that you're putting it this way, 7%-ish doesn't sound so terrible. I agree. So all of a sudden, it's a relative. So keep that in mind. Don't look at 7% today as an absolute number, but more of a relatively to what is a reasonable number, right? That's one thing I want to say. Then let's take that 7% and apply it to the property we are considering. If this is $1 million home, every fraction of a percent translates to a lot of dollars, and impacts everything. So I get it. So obviously on $1 million home, the huge difference between 5.5 to 7, it may kill the deal. But when I'm doing a $300,000 home, that difference may translate to $150-ish in less cash flow. And it may still not kill my deal. Not that I like it, but again, I need to be able to explain it to myself and to others, and in order to come up to a decision about an investment property. So all of a sudden, we should not just be so focused on the percentage, but actually how that impacting our investment. Few years ago, I bought a property, and that was maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and I received an 8% interest rate in a period where 6% was probably, 6-ish% was probably going around. So I was willing to buy a property at 8%, while 6 was the interest rate. Why would I do that? Well, it was a good investment opportunity. It had seller financing. I got it for a good price. So all the other aspects of the deals were pretty good. And the rent even, was actually, the rent was covering the 8% interest rate quite well. So it was still made sense. Not that I wanted 8% to pay or something like that, and I knew it's temporary for a few years, but I wasn't intimidated by 8% because in the compounds of that transaction, it made sense with the terms, with the seller financing, if me not needing to work, for so many hours on getting the loan approved and all of those things. That's why I decided the 8% works for me, and it wasn't short-term seller financing loan. I could actually stick around with that loan for many years. So that benefited me. I didn't end up, keeping the properties for many years, but at that time, while 6% was the market rate, it still made sense in that deal to do it at 8%. So that to give you a little bit an example and perspective how to tackle this point and not just use the term, oh my God, 7% is high, because it tells me nothing, right? It tells me nothing. How about if from 6 months from now or a year, the interest rate that today 7% becomes 7.5 or 8, what are we going to say? Oh my God, remember those days when we had 7%? Oh, I miss those days. This is great rate back then, but now, oh my God, it's terrible. So keep that in mind. Lastly, I want to show you how I measure ROI, how I go about measuring the ROI. And I think that's a little bit different than what I see people typically do. So for me, I call it the total ROI on an investment property. The total ROI is a mix or a combination of 3 ROIs or 3 growth engines or vectors, however you want to call them. The first one is the cash on cash. What is the cash on cash? Cash on cash is my realistic cash flow from the property after realistic expenses. And I'm emphasizing it because I really want people to do realistic analysis and not forget to put numbers like vacancy or forget to put HOA and forget to put maintenance, which I've seen every once in a while. So keep that in mind. That's why I'm emphasizing realistic numbers. I tend to not forget those figures, even if I don't know all the numbers 100% accurately. I want to make sure I'm giving those representations. In a single family rental property, most of the time, long term, most of the time, it's not a big numbers game. It's actually a small numbers game. So forgetting $20 of HOA and maybe some X percentages of vacancy can turn out to quite a lot of money impacting the cash flow, just as a side note. So cash on cash is number one. Now, my baseline for calculation for the returns is not the down payment. It's the down payment plus closing costs, mortgage costs, and all other expenses I have with the property to bring it over or to bring it to the point that it's rent ready or ready to be rented. So the funds that I need to put after the purchase in order to make sure that we cleaned the house, we painted the house, we fixed this, we fixed that, maybe put a new roof, I cannot ignore those numbers. Those are not small numbers. They add up. So for me, the baseline for ROI calculation is the total money I'm going to spend to get to the point that I can get in a renter. Okay, not just purchase or acquire or close on the property. Going back to our total ROI, cash on cash is number one. Appreciation is my number two, and I use it carefully. I take into account 3.5%, 4% annual average appreciation over the years, not over a year, but holding it long term. I feel comfortable using some inflation rate appreciation, not the inflation that we've seen during COVID. I'm talking about realistic 3.5%, 4% ish. So I'm not ignoring the appreciation, but I'm not abusing the appreciation, okay? So if you feel 4% is too optimistic, you can lower it to 3.5 to 3, whatever. If you think it's too pessimistic, you can actually increase that. So that's what I'm using, but I'm not ignoring it as it doesn't count, like, because I've seen for 20 years, it's there on a long-term hold. It's there, right? So I'm looking on average over maybe at least 10 years, and I'm assuming some appreciation. Historically speaking, even before COVID, with the crazy days of COVID, on average, we've done way better than 4% since the crash of 2008, right? Way better than 4% a year. So I don't want to use more than that, but I don't want to ignore it also. And the third thing, so we talked about 2 out of the 3 for the total ROI. The third is return on equity. What is return on equity? Is the every year the rent that comes in pays expenses. Part of those expenses is the mortgage payment, which is principal and interest. Principal. Principal gets reduced year after year from the rent slowly. So that means every year I'm actually building equity by paying down the mortgage principal, right? It's not a lot in the first few years, but slowly it adds up. So that means when I'm looking at the return, one day, maybe in a year, maybe in 6, when I'm going to refinance or sell the property, I'm going to meet that money that it's accumulated in the property and not in my pocket. So cash flow comes to my pocket, value, appreciation, and equity by paying down the mortgage principal are in the property. They're locked in until we meet the money. When do we usually meet the money? When we do refi or we sell. So it's there. So I factor that as well based on how much actual mortgage principal is being paid on an annual basis. So I take that into consideration. Remember that my cash flow, the way I measure it, is expenses, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, etc., and the mortgage payment. So there is a component of principal payment in my mortgage payment, and we measure the way we evaluate, analyze rental properties. We actually have an Excel that we put all the assumptions, like the 4% appreciation and increase, a little bit increase in rent and a little bit increase in expenses, etc., and the mortgage information, and we stretch it over 30 years. That means we have 30 columns that are evaluating the performance of that property based on all those assumptions year after year after year. And then we take the periodic averages, how the property is performing on the first 5, 10, 15, and 20, and we do averages, annual averages in all those periods. And that's how we kind of look at this instead of just analyzing a property, how it performs on day one, or year one, which is usually the worst one of them all. So the total ROI, cash on cash, and the appreciation, a little bit of appreciation and principal reduction. And we're going to not meet the money in the pocket on a monthly basis, but some of it as a cash flow we will see sooner or meet sooner, and some of it will wait for us to do some activity regarding selling or refinancing. If you are coming from the tech sector, you're probably familiar with what's called the hockey stick of the startup companies. That's something that is not normally known or used in real estate. I do want to tell you there is what I call a little bit of a hockey stick phenomena that I'm not sure many people are aware. What is the hockey stick altogether? It just means the value of your portfolio or your investment over time kind of starts not just going up in a straight line, but picking up the pace and moving up even quickly or quicker. How does that usually happen? In traditional technology startup, it usually starts with maybe a year or 2 or 3 that is very slow, and all of a sudden they have a big jump when they're very successful, and that equity or that value of the company jumps, maybe through the roof. That's not usually how it works with traditional, nice, boring rental properties. Where does it show itself? When you buy a property and you sit on it for maybe 5 years or 7 years, and you let it just sit there in the background, collect the rent, the cash flow, and let it slowly appreciate, right? Maybe just the 4% I'm not talking about. 5 to 7 years later, all of a sudden, some equity have been accumulated. And if you are very like on the top of things, you may come up and say, you know what? The value of my property have risen so much. The rent typically not as much. There's a lot of equity that I'm not tapping into. One of the ways to tap into that equity, there's few ways, but one of the ways is actually to sell that house, maybe do a 1031 exchange and translate or create from that one property 2 properties. So all of a sudden you have bought one, and a few years later, it just takes time and patience. that single property is now translated into two working in your favor. I'm assuming, for example, working maybe with buying them with the mortgages. So if you do that, that all of a sudden create that little turn of a small hockey stick possibility. Now, if you actually not just buy one, but buy two, you may be able to do exactly what I just told you in 5 to 7 years and translate those two into 4 properties. So that's the hockey stick effect that can happen. It just takes a little bit, usually takes a little bit slower than what you normally expect in a successful startup. This is not the acceleration of a successful startup. This is the acceleration of a slow startup, maybe not even a startup, just being slow. You could be lucky. You could be lucky that that one property actually accumulates so much equity and it's actually translating into 3 properties, which is great. But that's just adding to or getting lucky on a plan that you're thinking of and saying, oh, I wasn't planning on 3 to buy 3 out of the first one, but to buy actually only 2. It did happen to me. The first property that I purchased, I was able to refinance twice, not even sell. And that first property bought me, without me needing to bring more money out of pocket, 4 more properties. So I did get lucky. It did take a few years, right? But definitely happened to me that after a few years, all of a sudden, it more than doubled and I was able to pull equity and buy more properties. So that is a possibility. It's not a sure done, no problem, guaranteed plan. Nothing is. But there is an effect when you actually step in and start investing, you may be benefiting from it. So here is an example how we can accelerate or get a hockey stick working in our favor when we have those opportunities where we sell or refinance or exchange and basically letting one property that worked for us in the background, buy more properties. Bear with me. I'm almost getting to the end, and I think that this is maybe my the last, not the last one, before the last slide. And this is something I want to kind of share with you that I think is super important that I've noticed over the years working with people. What I've seen over the years, and I was also kind of, I don't want to say suffering, but going through that as well personally, is that as people, the skill of asking good questions, it's critical and important. I think that as people altogether, especially in business, and in my perspective, especially in real estate. So knowing how to ask questions or asking good questions, it's such an important skill that it will, if you don't need to master it, but you need to be good with it. And I'll give you some suggestions how you can. It will advance you tremendously, because when you know to ask good questions, guess what happens? You will get good answers, or full of content type of answers that will enable you to make better decisions. That's the formula here, right? But a lot of people are just do not have that skill set, or have that skill, or do not understand how critical that skill set is. So what can you do? What I've done in many years ago, when I realized it's important without realizing how really important it is, I would prep myself for every important enough meeting, not every single meeting, but important meetings. I would prep myself with questions, and I would write them down on a notepad, or over the years, maybe some document online on the digital, whatever, WhatsApp, whatever. And I would just slowly collect questions. So when I'm thinking about the meeting, maybe I have my first 3, 4, 5 questions, and maybe on the next 2 to 3, 4 days, while I'm doing something else, another question pops into my mind, I write it. Another question pops into my mind, I write it. So slowly I would kind of gather those questions, because when I am on the meeting, I'm many times definitely valuing my time. I know that many times the time of the other party is also limited. So this is, an opportunity to address everything that I want. And I still do this exercise to this day, right? And I bring those questions and I try to review them almost always before the meeting, again, to refresh, maybe see if something was came up, and then I step into the meeting with my questions, right? And I can tell you that I do it almost everywhere. Let me give you some examples. Every time I am meeting for having a legal consultation, I may have 3 or 10 questions, but they're coming, they're there, because I know if I learned that even with the professionals, the legal people, the CPA or tax people, only when I start or I ask those questions, the good answers come out, even with the people that's supposed to be pushing that information over to me. My CPA, I love her dearly. If I don't ask those questions, I don't get the good answers. When I ask starting them, she start, oh, you can do this, or it's a good question. Let me research, or let me get back to you, which is great. That's okay. At least she's going and researching and coming back with answers what we can do. I notice it so many times in my career. Only when those questions are coming, those results are presenting themselves. So that's why it's so important. And if you're not good with that, maybe find a system for you. My system worked, collecting those questions, writing them down. Many times I'm even sending them over in advance, because if they have my questions in advance, they can prepare better for the meeting. We're going to use that time more in a more beneficial way, at least from my from my end. So many times I do that as well. I definitely collect those questions. I found it to be extremely important, even with the parties that should be the ones who generating the information or need, or maybe want to sell us something or something like this. So keep that in mind. Super important. Learn to ask questions, or teach yourself to ask questions. It will advance you tremendously in real estate for sure, probably in other parts of our lives as well. Guys, before we open up our session here for Q&C, questions and conversations, and I hope you'll share with me a little bit about you guys as well, so it's not one-sided, I want to offer you a gift, an appreciation for being here. And the gift is very simple, or at least I think it's very simple. It's 3 parts. Part 1 is an ebook that I've put together, which brings a lot of information and details and things that I covered here, but many more that are simply outlined. I think it's like 35-ish pages, easy read, a lot of common sense, a lot of experience, not a sales pitch, no sales pitch, any of those things. So number 1 is a good, based on experience ebook with a lot of pointers, a lot of nuggets. Second thing is a tool, or is a list of what I've been collecting for years of tool, resources, links for different services in our industry. There's some simple stuff there that you probably like, maybe Zillow and Redfin, which I don't even count as much significance. And there's lots of other ones. I think we're like almost 90 different links. Probably 10 of them are for different podcasts and other ones. So good resource of links. The third is a list of curated videos that are diving into specific topics, such as debunking or demystifying the concept of LLCs, which I have nothing against LLCs, but I think it's just being put on a pedestal by real estate investors for the wrong reason, just as an example. And questions you should be asking yourself, and the advanced strategies, how to do better, different aspects. You are most welcome to benefit. Those are not available to the public online. They're hidden, so to speak. You're going to be benefiting from them. So if you want any of those gifts, you're most welcome. You just need to go to this link, which is simplydoit.net/simplydoitgifts with an S at the end, and use the free code simplydoit number 10. We do sell it for, I think, $40, or I can't remember exactly how much, or $50 right now, something, or $30, something like that. You use the code and you get it for free. If for some reason something is not working with the code, because we did have a problem maybe a month ago that someone said, or 2 people said the code didn't work, let us know. You don't need to pay, right? A gift is a gift. So I'm just saying, if there is a glitch, let us know. We will definitely share that with you. gladly share that with you. Here's my contact information. We have, here's additional resources. You're most welcome to follow us on YouTube. We put videos all the time. I just uploaded in the past week 2 new concept kind of videos. One is criticizing investment that were done 3 years ago in Austin, Texas. If you want to know why am I criticizing it. Another one that I uploaded yesterday comparing one deal that I did not want to do 6 years ago and one deal that I wanted to do and was actually done. One in Oklahoma City and one in close to Nashville, side by side, explaining the thought process of why I did not want to do the Oklahoma City one and what led me for not doing the Oklahoma City one and do the Nashville one and how things turn out to be. Spoiler, Nashville did way better, way better than the Oklahoma City one. And this is not about being Monday morning quarterback. This is actually telling you we're going to travel in time and see some of the decision-making process in 2017, I believe, that resulted why Nashville and not Oklahoma City, and explaining and showing some nuances that I don't like to see out there that people are not aware of, where, but diving into the details, literally putting them side by side. So those are just recent one that we uploaded in the past week. There are many more YouTube videos, podcasts, information, sample properties. We even have a Telegram that you can follow if you want to see updates and some properties and some things, like different things that we find throughout our day when that are related to real estate investing. This is my contact information if you want to reach out. No problem there. I'll maybe come back to it in a moment after. Okay. So now that I am done with my part, and I'm going to put my contact information again, hopefully I'll try. Hang on a second. Let me put the links again so you can just get them. And already while I'm doing that, I am asking you guys, I am done with my part. If you want to maybe say something about your who you are, what you're doing, you have a question, share that. I think that'll be terrific. I would love that. I love that we are sometimes having a conversation after the session. So by all means, let's dive in. Let's see if there are any questions. I'm just putting all the important links, the resources, so you have them available. Okay, now we need the first courageous person to break the ice. Oh, Tal, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
All right, please, my
How you doing,
friend.
Dan? Really
Thank
nice to
you,
meet you.
courageous person, number one.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't that responsive earlier. I was on another call as well. Thank you for a great presentation. It was really nice, and I just loved it. Um, I do have like a few questions. I'm a very small investor, and I'm looking to get like from my main market and expanding into another market. What do you think? It's like if someone sees itself very attached to cash flow, you had the scale that you show in your presentation
Right,
with
yeah.
appreciation and the cash. I'm more leaning towards the cash. I really need to see like some return for my money. Um, what would you and you talked about Oklahoma, which is a very cash flow oriented market.
Mhm.
Where do you think it would be like the best market to invest like right now?
For cash
That's
flow?
that's cash on cash. Yes, and of course, appreciation may be like a bonus, something that
So,
is like nice to have as well.
okay. So you see, so it's already not just cash flow, but cash flow and appreciation, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
And
so it's first of all, I'll be honest, I don't know all the markets around the country,
okay.
to tell you that answer. I
Hmm.
know that a lot of investors that are seeking mostly the cash flow are going to the lower end type of properties in some of the not so attractive markets, in my opinion,
Hmm.
because they're chasing the cash flow. That's not what I'm looking for. I will tell you this. What I've learned over the years, and that requires some patience and some attention and some, time consuming. Every market can generate those deals. I would say almost every market. Well, let's just say many markets. I don't want to say California or some parts of New York or some, but many markets will, if you can find a good deal, that even the ones that I like to do, and maybe go through 5 offers or 10 offers until one accept your lower offer,
Hmm.
and that lower offer may yield in a better cash flow situation, still in a market with an appreciation. So even within a challenging market, you can find the property most times that will create that situation where it's still cash flowing, right? So this, we're using very
Yeah.
vague terms.
Yeah, but let me like maybe rephrase. Willing to go zero cash flow today, but with a cap rate of 6.5.
So
So it will cash flow like in the future when interest
I
rate
get it.
change.
So
So cash flow zero maybe, yeah, but a cap rate that makes sense, like around this upper like mid six. So can you like point out like to at least like one market that you see that is good?
so um, Kansas City, St. Louis, Birmingham, Nashville. I want to say Tampa and Orlando. If maybe Tampa and Orlando, it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
I would not consider the Texas markets because the property taxes and insurance are through the roof in a way. So
Mhm.
I would not. Oklahoma City too. Oklahoma City. The reason I have not a, the reason I stopped after 10 years, one of the reasons, there are a few reasons, but one of the main reasons I stopped in buying in Oklahoma City is because after 10 years of being active there from about 2005 to 2015,
Mhm.
I could just see that every other markets that we are active in, appreciation wise, is doing tremendously better.
Yeah.
Rent increase, much better, not tremendously, much better. So why would I spend energy on a market that I know not providing what almost every other market is doing? While it's not a bad market, I realize we can do better. I just
Yes.
historically speak, and I
Mhm.
dive into that in that video and explain that there's one other reason that you may find relevant. I don't know. It has to do with um, your status as a citizen. If you are a citizen or not, there is another problem in Oklahoma, not Oklahoma City, Oklahoma altogether. But let's not dive into that. That's a very specific situation for Oklahoma. So we see appreciation and small cash flow these days in multiple markets. So it really depends on the budget, on how comfortable you are buying, remotely. How much? Remember that what I said, the personality box?
Yeah.
Did you see that? There was a slide on the personality box. A lot of it has to do with like, I have clients that they don't just they're like, I don't have time to this, find me a property, or we don't want to spend hours until we get to that little gem. We're okay with just a good one, right?
Mhm.
Which I've seen that good ones are performing very well, and it's not like the gems are doing better. Some people want to optimize their decision process even more. So I think it requires a
Exactly.
little bit more um um legwork, or maybe refining, because many markets will provide what you're asking for. So there's not like a single one or two that only those two will do it, right? So all the ones that I've mentioned will very likely provide, not only will actually do better than what you're saying, You said breaking even. I'm saying cash flow, a small cash flow, right? So with the
Yes,
appreciation. So
yes,
the
yes,
you don't have to compromise on the cash flow, yet don't expect high cash flow, but don't compromise on the cash flow when you can still have cash flow and somewhat of appreciation.
yes, of
And
course.
also, there's also force appreciation. You know what's force appreciation?
No, I do not.
So when you buy some of the properties we are considering, they need something that there's some, let's just call it simple and small problem that will probably enable us to buy them for less. And when I say simple and small problem, I'm not talking about a complete rundown, gutted, in a terrible shape kind of a property that needs a lot of work. Let me give you an example. So we have a property in Birmingham right now, came to us from our team. It's off market, came from the property manager that we work with for many years in Birmingham, Alabama. He brings most of the property managers that we work with, first of all, bring them to us before they send it, elsewhere, just because of the magnitude of the relationship.
Mhm.
Round numbers, market value 290, needs some work just because it's a lot of cosmetics that has been deferred maintenance, or cosmetic. There's nothing wrong with the house. There's no problem with I think the roof needs to be replaced, but there's no foundation. There's not, I mean, it's a house you can literally, it's tenant occupied at the end of the month. You could even turn it around immediately and rent it, but it's just not in a good shape. It just looks, kind
Mhm.
of, not being touched for many years because it's been a long-term tenant. It's a 2005 in a good area, built in 2005. Seller is not a wealthy person, and she is probably, from what we know from the property manager, would not want to spend now $15,000 to $20,000 to kind of, freshen up and put the cosmetic in order to make it appealing for a tenant, and not to mention even to get even a higher rent. So she would probably not want to go through spending more money at the moment, not that amount, and not want to go through the vacancy of that time that it will take to prep that house.
Mhm.
That creates an opportunity for us. So we are offering to our clients to come in, buy it for cash. And because it's a cash and a quick close of 3 weeks, trying to get it for 230 to 240. So that means, let's say we get it for 235 and we spend 20, that's 255, and the house is worth 290. It's not a amazing deal, right? But it's a good location, good year, very good location. In Birmingham, it's a good year. It's schools, good location, good community, good metro, not old, just need to be kind of updated. That is something that from day one, you'll probably have $30,000 worth of equity, maybe even a little bit
Yeah.
more, assuming we
Mhm.
can bet the 235. We don't know if we can get it for sure because, we need to present an offer and then we will know what you think. But it's just around that. Nice deal. That
Yeah.
house I think will do, because I know the area, it will probably do very well. Your starting point makes it interesting because from day one, you already have some built-in equity.
Mhm.
That is kind of force appreciation or built-in equity, which, by the way, no cap rate will factor that in. That's one of the reasons I don't want to use cap rates, because how do you factor that in to the equation? The fact that you have $25,000 of equity from day one.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Perfect.
But I do like
Uh,
more newer constructions, so I'm not in the game of like of
right.
getting fixers.
Um, Let me take another question here. Someone asked if the recording is going to be provided. The answer is yes. We'll email it after we upload. Next question is, I'm finding it harder to find good cash flowing properties now where property values and interests are higher. You're absolutely right. It's hard. We look at many properties until we find the one that is reasonable cash flow. Um, my question for you, if you want to elaborate, what's your expectation for cash flow? If you're expecting, let's just say, on a middle class neighborhood, that for a house that costs 300,000, to get $400 or $300, that will be challenging. We see in some of our markets on a middle class area, maybe B, maybe around B, 300,000. We're probably going to see realistically 150-ish after all expenses. So now, part of our working assumption that we may have an opportunity, or we will probably have an opportunity to refinance to a lower rate in the next 3 to 4 years. That's not something that we know. I don't have any inside info. It's just a working assumption that we'll have that opportunity. I'm going to take another question that we have here. If my answer is not clear enough, please refine your question or ask a follow-up question. Tal, you're most welcome to jump in after the next question if you have another one. Sorry if I came rude for moving to other questions.
No.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Many thanks for the valuable information and sharing your valuable. Oh, okay. So it's not even a question. Thank you very much for the feedback. Appreciate it. Let's see if something else is coming. Tal, if you have another question, by all means. No other questions are trickling in so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Having some challenges like finding new opportunities that would make sense to me. I start looking at like maybe short-term rentals in my area. Is this something you have an experience or have done in the past?
Yes, and we're even doing it started doing it with a spin, and I'll explain that in a moment. May I ask when you say your area, what your area is?
Yes, I'm in Menlo Park, California.
Menlo Park, Silicon
Yeah,
Valley?
yeah,
Okay.
like Palo Alto.
Challenging is a very interesting word when you live in Menlo Park. When I would say super challenging is where you start.
Oh yeah, but I do out of state. It's like I do remote investing. So no,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, of course.
Okay. So I do have some experience, first-hand experience with short-term rentals. And I found over the years that in most short-term rentals, if you are not in a super high demanding area that you'll have a lot of like very occupied, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging because you are paying for all the expenses that typically in a traditional rental,
Yes.
the tenant is paying, all the utilities, all those things, you're paying for it, right? So that's one. There's more wear and tear. There's a lot. It's running a business, right? Maybe
Yes.
not a complicated business, but it is running a business in a way. And if you're utilizing property managers, then many times their cut is so significant relatively that it eats into that. On the top of that, I don't know if you have experience with the main platform in that industry, the Airbnb. So I think as a platform, it's amazing.
Yes.
But anything that comes to support for guests or for owners, unless they change something in the past year or so, it's terrible. Terrible. I mean, terrible. On the top of that, so you have a lot of challenges with that. You got to be in a very high demand area.
Yeah.
Since COVID, there's a lot of saturation of short-term rentals. So the market really took in many places, not everywhere, took a hit where there's a lot of competition. So all of a sudden, you have a property that maybe even performed well a year ago. Now it's dropping just because the saturation or demand have changed because of COVID created a peak. The market responded, and now the market is like overwhelmed. What happening, right? There's like people are reporting on 80% drop in bookings, 80%, right? So
Yes.
that's a lot. On the top of that, if you're not using a manager, just expect those calls. Where is the key? And I can't find, and they,
Of course.
so and they come and come a lot. So I have friends who do that in another country. They do very well. They developed a system, but they have like almost close to 100% occupancy. So they're like, that's fine. It's a cash cow for them. That's why I'm saying if you have that situation, that's great. So
Yes.
STR, short-term rentals, very challenging. in my opinion, and not necessarily worth the travel. By the way, there's one more thing. Airbnb has been around for more than 10 years, maybe close to somewhere between 10 to 15-ish years, like really around significantly. 10 years plus later, regulation is still bouncing back and forth in some cities. So you may find yourself in a city that the regulation is saying you can't do an Airbnb,
Mhm.
and then in 3 months they change the regulation, and maybe in 2 years it will change it back. So 10 years in, it's still unstable regulatory wise. Just one more trouble. Now, some
Yeah.
places, no problem. Some places, clearly no. Some places clearly yes. And many are still that, for example, a lot of cities are saying, or counties, hey, we want our share in the income. So tax for us because we want to get a piece of the action as well. So just as an example.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you what we started doing recently as a spin on that idea completely. What we started doing recently is doing what we call MTR. MTR is the mid-term rentals. Have you heard that term, or hybrid rental?
No.
Okay. So I think this is, in my opinion, this is why we are started doing it recently, is a more lucrative way and stable way than the short-term rental and the long-term rental. And it's another option. It's not the only one, but it's another option. That's not what we focus on, but we just want to have that additional option for income. Mid-term rental means instead of the short-term rentals or the long-term tenants, people that need a house for a period of a month or 2 or 3. Two
Yeah.
examples. Um, Two examples is people that their house went through going through some insurance incident and plumbing, and they need to vacate the house for 2 or 3
Mhm.
months until work is being finished, right?
Yes.
That's an example. I personally know 3 people that are going through that in my area, my social circles as we speak, right?
Mhm.
3 different families. That's one. Another example, one of the areas that we do it, it's not in California. The movie industry is very strong in that place. Sometimes people from that industry are coming for 2 months or 3 months to shoot a movie or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And people are looking not to stay at a hotel, but they actually want a place that they can cook dinners and relax and and decompress and not be stuck in that tiny room for a long period of time, right? That
Yes.
may be the cruise. Maybe some of the crew of the film that are coming and they're getting into a house together as 4 friends and coming in for 3 months or 2 months or something like that. So that's
Yes.
another example. So there are more setting scenarios like that, and that created an opportunity to do more rent, collect more rent on those kind of properties. The challenge is these properties need to be similar to the short-term rentals. So they need to be fully equipped, fully furnished, with the ability to live there and cook there and so on. So that is why it's a little bit more challenging than the long-term rental, but you are not dealing with those short-term tenants all the time. The way we tackle
Yes.
this is in between the mid-term rentals contracts, let's just say the insurance situation that are here for 3 months and the filling crew that comes, let's just say one is leaving on June 10th and the filling crew is coming on the 20th of June. So we have 10 days. What are you going to do in 10 days? Hey, Airbnb now makes sense to me, right? So
Yes.
Airbnb to close the gap. We have not just an Airbnb, but other avenues to close those gaps, okay, between the midterm rentals by doing similar things to Airbnb as an example. So that's
Mhm.
why it's less involvement. It's more behaving like a long-term rental in the sense of the type of people that are coming and contracts and, and all of those things. And then we use the short term to close those gaps. So that's why we have a better system and it's not suffering through the short-term noise, of the support and all of those things. just as an example.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
thought it could be like a good, combination of cash flowing while getting a good appreciation. Also, of course, depends on the area,
Absolutely.
Usually like the
Absolutely.
short term are probably going to be like um, vacational areas. So these are like more likely to appreciate over time.
What I just told you, we are looking at houses that make sense. They should be able to function okay with the traditional long-term rentals.
Yes.
A lot of the people we are targeting for this plan are actually people who have short-term rentals and are frustrated, or long-term rentals and are frustrated, right? And not necessarily people that are buying into this. So we're trying to convert the frustrated ones from one of those options into the middle one. And
Mm-hmm.
that is done in an urban environment. We're not necessarily targeting the vacation, traditional classical vacation type of property. So we're not doing it in the mountains. We're not doing
Mm-hmm.
it in the downtown, necessarily next to all the hip, things. It could work. We have one of those, but that's not like the target. We're actually looking maybe one next to a hospital, maybe one next to a university,
Yes.
and that is
I understand.
another layer. That's not the only one. It's one more layer. Someone
Yeah,
who
it's a
needs
different
a house
segment.
for insurance reasons that can happen everywhere, right? But we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
depend only on that, right? So that's why
Mm-hmm.
we developed all those multiple avenues that we can use in order to attract different type of renters in that category of midterm rentals and close the gaps with
Yes,
the short terms.
absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Good insights.
Pleasure. Pleasure meeting you, and thanks for the questions. I'm gonna see if there anybody else, the other Tal, Van, Michal, Vicky, any questions? Definitely nice to see some of the names. I just missed Jonathan, which I believe it's the Jonathan that I know and haven't spoke to him a long time. If that's you, it's good to see you. I hope I'm guessing it's you, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna wait another minute or two while Tal is pulling dinner. What's cooking, Tal?
Patties and French fries. This is gonna be
Right,
nice for the kids. Yeah.
good. Okay. Okay, I think we can wrap it up. I appreciate the questions, the engagement, sticking until that late time. You are most welcome to reach out if want our help to buy more rental properties out of state. That's what we do day in, day out. So you can definitely reach out. We actually have a newcomer to the session at the last minute. So I'll be happy to chat with you. I want to thank you for taking the time. I'm going to say for Jeff, who just disappeared, I don't need to say anything. Oh, Jeff is here. We are just wrapping the session, Jeff. So if you signed up, you will be receiving an email with a link for the recording in a day or two. So I want to thank you for staying, asking, participating, and joining the session. Have a terrific rest of your week. Hope to talk to you soon. Sorry for Jeff for missing you. Have a terrific night. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.